So Wahoo has just announced that they have joined the Freeride Club. Now, the ability to go ahead and see climb data, gradient data, all that kind of stuff as you're free riding as opposed to having a course loaded. This is something that Garmin just announced a week ago as well with the Freeride ClimbPro, all of which is a bit of a copy of Hammerhead's Freeride Climber feature that they announced a year ago. Now, we just got back from an initial ride testing this out, so I'm going to show you how it works. I'm going to show you side by side though with both the Hammerhead and the Garmin Edge 840 Freeride experience, just so you can see kind of those things and how they are slightly different between them. Now I'm going to jump straight into showing you this just because it seems a little bit easier to do that than explain it all. However, there are a couple of very unique Wahoo things we'll dive into after the video that are worthwhile noting. Okay, here we are riding along. Now there are a couple of Strava Live segments I'll have to declutter out of the way right there. Now on the left-hand side, we're going to see the Garmin ClimbPro trigger first. There we go with the go indicator. Now we see the Strava Live segment starting, as well as the Hammerhead Crew 2 starting its climb. And then now we see the Wahoo join in the climb as well. This is all basically just starting to increment to go up, so I'd say it's kind of a wash in that particular respect. You see in the case of the Wahoo there in the middle that it's got the Strava Live segment along the bottom. It's also triggering yet another Strava Live segment, so that's going to be kind of something else you have to get out of the way there. I disabled live segments on the other units, but the Wahoo one was not listening to my disablement, so it is what it is. You can see that triggering there as well. So I've got a page away from this a few times. I pressed the wrong button once. I hit Summit, thinking that'll take me back to that segment, and then page, and eventually I get there. So there we go. So at the very top there, you see Summit number 3. That means it's the third attempt of this I've done right now. It's about 40 seconds in this particular climb. Below that, you see ascent to go, as well as meters to go, and you see the reminder to eat Haribo, obviously. And then below that, you see the current gradient, which is 7.1%. And off the side of that, you see the time remaining at the top of the climb based on its estimation. And you can see that particular climb gradient, the entire hill, this particular summit. It's not a very long one, obviously, but it sort of illustrates the point there. So we've got the skateboarder coming down the hill. Somewhat surprised me, despite the fact that I'd seen him 3 times before. Just wasn't expecting to see him in front of me in that particular position. Now, you can see on the right-hand side that we only have on the Hammerhead 0.0 to the top. So it's actually going to end its climb a little bit earlier than the rest. So you see as it goes around this corner right here, it'll go ahead and end and say climb complete, versus the Wahoo and the Garmin climbs are a bit later on. And I'm still climbing, just to be very clear here. You can see in the case of Wahoo showing 5% or so. Now I'm starting to level out and to keep on leveling out a little bit more as I go around this next curve there into where I would consider is sort of the top ridge of this. Right? That I just pointed out that orange sign there. That orange sign there is largely considered like the summit, but this is sort of a relatively flattish kind of top. It's not very crystal clear. So in this case, I've got about 10 meters to go on the Wahoo, and then boom, I complete the climb there and it adds it to my list. In the case of the Garmin, I still have about 40 meters to go. Now I would argue I'm starting to go downhill here. In fact, I'm already kind of coasting. So it's a little bit behind on the top of its particular climb. And you can see there is the Garmin ClimbPro climb completion triggering as well. But again, this is just one climb, but it's all roughly the same ballpark. In this case, Hammerhead definitely ended early, and I would say Garmin definitely ended late. And Wahoo ended probably more towards the late side of it. And the thing is, with this particular climb hill thing that I'm on, it's not like a boop like this. It just ends at the top in a very clear cut. Instead, it's kind of like this. And so this whole like flat range there, sort of up for interpretation, I guess. And we see this across a lot of the different climb sort of gradient software features that, the exact point sometimes is a little bit fuzzy as to where it is. And that's true even in real life, right? Like, does a climb start, out of town where it's like a false flat, or does it start where it goes F you like this? That's something that, companies have to sort of figure out, but people do as well. Now, up until now, Wahoo's course-based feature have triggered with a 500-meter long threshold and a 3% average gradient, and being the most important part. I had to have both of those in order to trigger, which is in the same ballpark as Garmin's, which is also 503%, and Hammerhead's, which is 400 meters and 3%. However, with the revamped version here, it actually decreases. So it goes down to 400 meters and 3%, joining Hammerhead, but on top of that, there's a sliding scale going all the way down to 250 meters and 7%. The idea being that if you have a very steep and short hill, it'll go ahead and still trigger this feature. That's especially notable off-road as well, where those climbs tend to sometimes be a little bit shorter, but still even more miserable. This will work there as well. Okay, so the very first hill there worked pretty darn well. No major issues. Obviously, it's not a very exciting hill, but it's got some steepness, and fine, whatever. It's all I got around here. So then I went hunting for another couple hills, and there's actually I think 5 or 6 approaches that you can take up to the top of this hill. Some of them are shorter and steeper and so on. And the long and the short of that is that the Wahoo unit didn't trigger on any of the other approaches. Which is odd because the Garmin actually did trigger on one of them. The other ones were, I guess, are all too short or too low gradient or whatever the case may be to trigger. Hammerhead didn't trigger on any of the other ones in free ride mode, though I know it does trigger in course-based mode when it knows, again, the longer course. And that's probably because one of the approaches kind of goes up and then it settles down a little bit, then goes back up again, and that little settling piece there. Nonetheless, I was a little bit surprised that the Wahoo didn't trigger on the steepest of those, given it is the new shorter thresholds there. But that's, again, more testing I want to do a little bit down the road. Get it down the road. Also, by the way, if you're finding these jokes awesome or funny, just hit that like button at the bottom there. It really does help with this video and the channel quite a bit. Now, there are four-ish features, things that are unique on the Wahoo side that I found pretty cool. First off is that Wahoo has put chevrons on the map page for those climbs. So you'll see them in green, I believe it is, versus orange for Strava Live segments. That's a very nice little touch there. I totally forgot to get a screenshot of that, so here's what that looks like there from their press pack. Number two, I like the fact that it shows the steeper and shorter climbs than their competitors do. That's a really cool feature. Even if it didn't trigger for me on this one, I like the theory that 250 meters versus the 400 and 500 meter threshold. Number three, I like the fact that you can place those Summit data fields on other data pages. So yes, you have the default stock Summit climb page, if you will, so you can see all the climbing things, but you can also take any of those data fields and put them on another data page. So you can see this here where I took my power data page that I've got. This is one that just has like 5, 10, so on second power stuff, and I added at the bottom there 2 of the Summit data fields. Now it does show NA when you're not in the climb, so I wish those kind of gracefully disappeared. You can obviously just press the side buttons on the Wahoo units to make those bottom fields drop off, but it'd be cool if they just simply, gracefully disappear. But nonetheless, I do love the fact that you can do that. You can't do that on the other units today. Garmin says they're talking about doing that, the idea that you can take any of those data field elements and put them on any other pages, but for the moment, Wahoo's got a bit of an advantage there. And the last thing I think is pretty cool here that no one else is doing is that you can see that elevation profile page beyond the top of the climb and forever. So that will always stay on, even if you have no immediate climb there. You can just see the elevation, like maybe just some rollers and stuff like that. That stays on there all the time, which I think is pretty darn cool. Now, there are 2 notable downsides. The very first one is it doesn't give you any sort of countdown to the climb. Both Hammerhead as well as Garmin do that. It just simply said like go or start or whatever it was. So that was kind of weird. And number 2, there's no way to see the average gradient remaining to the top of the climb. So you can put the average gradient of the climb, and that just shows you from start to finish this value right there, and it stays static the entire time you're riding. I actually added that to that power page. You can see there in the corner, and it never changed. Just stay that same 4.3 or whatever % it was all the way to the top. Average gradient remaining is super useful to be able to look at that and go, yeah, my suck is getting less now. It's no longer 9% average gradient remaining, it's now 7% or 5% or whatever it may be. So hopefully that's something they can add down the road. Speaking of which, this feature will not be available today. It's coming out on May 2nd, so you got about 2 weeks until it pops out there. But during that time, I'm going to take this as well as the Hammerhead Crew 2 and the Garmin Edge units and do some comparisons side by side, not just for the automated climb features, but also things like gradient responsiveness and all that. In fact, as you're watching this video, the moment this video drops live, I'm boarding a plane to go and start doing just that. So, and in particular, there's 3 areas I still want to dig in more deeply on this. Number 1 is, are the start and end points correct, or what I would assume is correct for a given climb? So for example, on Garmin's latest Freestyle ClimbPro, sometimes it includes too much of the false flat ahead of time. That's something I want to see if Wahoo does that. I just need more variety of climbs. You just got to ride this thing for more weeks or whatever the case is to kind of ferret some of those things out. Number 2, does the underlying data that's being presented ahead of time, so the look ahead data, is that correct on the unit? So not the instantaneous gradient coming from the sensors inside of this, but the map data basically that shows you what's coming up. So for example, Hammerhead has some issues in that realm where that data is often incorrect ahead of time. So that's kind of a big part of this, and I want to see how well this looks, again, over a wide variety of climbs. And then number 3, how does it handle mid-climb road splitting? So you have a road that's going along, and then boom, the road splits. Which one does it choose? Does it choose the most psychological one? And that should theoretically be based on heat data, popularity data, all that kind of stuff. And that's something, again, just need a lot of climbs to figure out and see if that does that correctly over time. In the case of both Garmin and Hammerhead, it largely does that pretty darn well. But again, I need more climbs here to see if it tries to pick the right road for where I'm probably going to go. Anyways, if you found this video interesting and useful, you know what to do. Whack the like button, the thingamajigs, and all the stuff. With that, have a good one.